that are holding your church back? What are the experiences, what's happening in your church that can be holding you back from the fulfillment of God's vision for your church? What are the behaviors at your church that can hold you back? And it's very, very revealing when they take some time at their tables to begin to deal with some of those kind of issues. What are the kind of things that can hold our church back? And we get some really honest feedback from these teams about things that are going on in their church. And you hear constantly from the groups our resistance to change, attitudes that are me and mine kind of mentalities. I was working with a church in Tennessee, and they had an incredible vision plan. They were really moving forward. They had a big Friends Sunday where everybody was bringing somebody unchurched to church on that Sunday, and so they were really ramping up for unchurched people to be at the church on that Sunday. A young man in the church had invited a friend who works with him, 19 years old, to come that Sunday. This young man had never been in a church in his life. His first time in a church. And there's a lot more of those than we realize that have never ever been inside of a church. Okay? So this young man shows up, is coming through the lobby, and before he can get into the auditorium, some old codger in that church walks up to him and says, "Hey boy, take your hat off. Don't you know better than to have a hat on in church?" And that 19-year-old young man turned around and walked right back out that door. See, there are things that hold us back. And that's just an example. And to get churches to get real about that, to actually be willing to say these are some things that we've got to change about our culture that's holding our church back. So that discussion becomes very, very important before we begin to move to the next segment of that. And that has to do with looking at our priorities as a church, our behaviors as a church. That will bring us to that point of beginning to come to put together a set of core values. These are the values we want to embrace as a church now moving forward. The values we want to embrace. What are those values we want to embrace that will help us to begin to create a new culture in our church of how we will do life and ministry. You see some samples there in your notes. The one word, core values: integrity, forgiving, relevant, serving. Those that are two words: intentional discipleship, global missions, passionate worship, scriptural fluency, short, memorable statements, a culture of honor, every soul matters, the Bible is our guidebook, equipping and empowering people, committed to excellence. Those are just samples that they have in their notes to help stimulate the table discussion as to what are the values we want to embrace as a church moving forward. And that starts that very important discussion at the table. I'd like for us to take a few minutes and do that at your table, just to put together a set of values that would just give you a feel for what that discussion is like. We generally say to them, 5 or 6 values, no more than 10 to 12, that you will kind of embrace as a church. So I'd like us to take just a few minutes at your tables, if you would, put together a list of core values for any church that you want to come up with, and then I want to get some feedback. Okay, let's take about 5 minutes for some table talk, and then we'll
core values. Core values. One word, core values. Longhorn. Oh no. Wrong church. Wrong church, huh? Yes. I like some of the behaviors they mentioned. Forgiving.
Yeah, forgiving is good.
Forgiving.
But if you go back to page 12.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that is a 12. It says priorities plus behavior is equal core values.
Right?
So what are your priorities?
You got to forget your priorities and your behavior. Hey, good afternoon. Good to see you. Good to see you. My name's Jamie Gardner. Good to meet you.
Get that head off at our church.
That's priority. Yeah, that's priority.
And then behavior.
Had a couple conversations, a couple guys from Florida.
You would think. Loving.
Yeah. I don't know if they came in here.
Loving. Short sermons.
West Florida.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking.
The West Florida guys.
I don't see them there right now. Maybe I don't know.
There's a whole table here. What other priorities?
Excellence. 2 words. Intentional discipleship.
Children's ministry.
Yeah, those are all these priorities they have are great, actually. I'm looking at these priorities and going, wow, yeah, every one of those. I'm like, yes.
All these, yeah.
All these are great as far as that goes. The values should be forgiving, love, serving, loving, joyful worship, excellence. Joyful, okay.
Are we supposed to be doing something?
Coming up with core values. Yep. Core values, committed to excellence. I wrote that down.
One sentence explanation of each of your core values.
Wow. Right? Short, memorable statements. Welcoming culture, relevant. Culture of honor.
Putting a one word.
Every summer.
Welcome, loving. Wouldn't that be serving?
Yes.
Because you're going to serving them. Children's ministry.
Memorable statement.
Would be a one-word core value.
Committed to excellence. Committed to excellence. Equipping empowerment.
Loving children.
Loving children.
Culture of honor. Every soul matters. A welcoming environment. Welcoming environment. Relevant. Joyful worship.
So, what are our priorities?
Relevant, forgiving, relevant, serving, loving, excellent, joyful worship. Welcoming environment.
Vision.
Relevant, joyful
What I
worship.
want is, what I see us doing is focusing in the children's ministry.
Right.
Because without children, you don't have youth. You don't be doing
Short, memorable statements.
No, we're supposed to be.
Yeah, we got that one
here.
That's the next one.
Yeah,
It's not the
I'm
next
supposed
page.
to add those two together and put out core values.
Okay, we got that.
They give you some examples.
I would say prayer. We need the chapel.
Finalize your vision statement, clarify your 5 and 7 core values.
Yep. So you got
Behavior on that would be
stuff like a welcoming environment, relevant, joyful worship.
I like these examples right here.
I love the sentences they have. Putting it together in these small words is a little bit more difficult. Not trying to just steal their stuff, you know. Serving, global and focus, global focus,
I like this. What gets preference at our church?
growing people.
Preference.
what gets preference at our church. It's in the notes there to try and get some
Right.
conversation going in the team.
Yeah, this.
Right.
So this is after values. So this is after vision, right? So this is the core values.
Yes.
To build up
this
this vision.
yeah, we're coming down to the.
Yeah.
So we've got our mission, our vision, our values.
Values. What do we really value? Priorities and behavior.
Parties, I like that.
Parties and behavior.
Parties
and behavior. That's it.
I say spirit-led.
Spirit-led.
Yeah.
I like that when they've got spirit empowered.
I like that too. That's a good word. Spirit empowered.
Red spirit stole the same.
Well, that's the behavior. Get it right, Master. You'll make a name on the street.
So you got
I'm getting A's because I showed up.
a welcoming environment, relevant worship, right? Spirit empowered, growing people, global focus. Those are things I just wrote down.
Outreach.
A few things that are important. Joyful, expressive.
There's nothing about discipleship.
Yep.
Yeah, discipleship is in a priority.
Yeah, intentional discipleship. I put in there growing people, but same thing.
It's only at the very top of it.
Yeah.
Equipping, empowering people. Intentional discipleship. Growing people. Equipping. Growing and equipping people.
Just taking what we've got here.
Relevant. Simple, understanding way. All right. It's helped to grow their knowledge of the Bible and their relationship with Jesus. A welcoming culture is able to be valued and connect with people quickly.
Church family.
It's relevant. Strive to communicate biblical truth in a simple, understandable way.
Page 13 kind of helps you put it together.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, they've got
True.
They've got a sentence underneath each one.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Gotcha. Same as down here. Simple, understandable way. Welcoming culture, value, community.
Where's that at?
Intentional discipleship.
That's great.
Yeah, I know.
With the
Three words.
Excellent. Got excellent.
Just so you understand
That's the
how
vision, right?
we do this, one of the things that's important in our process with churches is we have the table talk, and then we ask for feedback from every table, from every church, to give us 2 or 3 of the core values, etc. And one of the things we discovered, we've got 10 churches in a room with their teams. Them hearing other churches share their values becomes very important. They learn from each other. Retreat 4, you see it happen phenomenally. But every time we have dialogue like this and feedback, we have them listening to other teams, other churches share. And in that sharing is a really growing process and learning process for lay people, hearing other lay people from other churches share. So let's just take a moment. Let's start around the tables real quickly. Somebody from your table stand up and just share with us 2 or 3 of the values that you just determined. Okay? And your outside voice. Everybody listen, please. Okay? Somebody else. Yes, sir.
Tennessee came up with community, multi-generational, nurturing, discipleship, generosity.
Okay, all right.
We came up with ties, time, integrity, excellence, and smile.
Okay. Somebody else, yeah.
Yeah, we wrote down mission, living on mission, word, worship, and service.
Okay. Okay, yes.
Community and relationships, authenticity, biblical foundation, relevance, spiritual encounters, development, and missional focus.
Okay. Okay. Somebody else, yes.
Worship God, learn God, serve God.
Okay. Okay. Somebody else want to share?
Looked it up. The authentic family atmosphere, credibility, and hilarious was definitely one of ours.
Well, seeing your group, I can understand. you can't get any better than the group at the table. That's what we have.
Right.
Somebody else. Yes.
It was about loving, kind, disciple, and patient.
Okay. Sanhedrin in the back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Somebody else. Look, give us what you got. Real loud. Turn around.
CARE Act, it is compassion, affirmation, restoration, application. CARE Act, attending, spreading, serving.
Okay. All right. Excellent. So then the next step in this process is asking them to define those values, to come up with a definition for those values, so that the things like this one, intentional discipleship, to help all ages grow in their knowledge of the Bible and in their relationship with Jesus Christ, a welcoming culture. So you see the definitions now for those values. One of the things that I ask them to consider, we don't force them to own a value, but I ask every church to consider in their core values something that reflects the idea of the priesthood of believers. That says that all of us have been called, all of us have been gifted. Say it however you want to say it, but that needs to get ingrained in the culture of every church. The understanding of the priesthood of believers in some way, shape, or form. So I kind of prejudice our groups that I'm working with to say, would you consider that in your values? We ask the pastor, once these values are completed and the definitions are done, we ask the pastor to preach those values in a series of messages in their church. Record those. They become a template then from all the new people coming to that church. They get the pastor of that church having communicated and preached the values of that church. It's got to get beyond something that goes on the back of a bulletin. It's got to become the way we do life and how we do life. We usually show a video that kind of describes that. I don't guess we've got that video, but Mike and I both use that video to help them understand that it has to become who we are. And so the value, it starts with what are the values we want to embrace as a church. Secondly, here's what it looks like if it's being lived out. That's the definition. And then it has to become a part of our teaching, our preaching, and displayed in every way, shape, and form in our church, so that we can begin to embrace a healthy, effective culture. Mike Clarensaw is going to join me here. You heard him speak for just a moment ago, but Mike Clarensaw pastored in Wichita, Kansas for a lot of years, and then came to headquarters to head up our Acts 2 journey process for several years, and had the privilege of working with him, and then went down to Southwestern. He's the dean over Bible and church ministries down there, and a prolific writer and great communicator and teacher. So Mike, jump in here and share something.
Well, thank you, Ron, very much. And it's great to be here. Look forward to the next day and a half. I get to visit with more of you. One thing that's really important here in this journey is really thinking about who's in the room. Many of the churches, when you were back in Retreat 1, identified themselves as plateaued, declining congregations. And so one thing we want to do in the value stage as well as in the vision stage is not simply affirm where we already are or what we already think, but we're trying to go on a journey. And so one of the things I always really want to emphasize in the values is tell me what has to matter if we're going to be the church of our vision. If we're going to be that church where we're seeing lives change, then don't give me a list of values that doesn't include the value we place on the power of God or on prayer or on the pursuit of the Spirit, because that's the only way we're going to get there. If we're not valuing the pursuit of God, we're not going to see lives change, because we don't change lives. If we say we're going to be that place that genuinely loves people or extends belonging, or however we word that, there ought to be something in the values that is reinforcing friendliness and embracing people, acceptance, whatever it is. We've got to connect the dots. There's got to be alignment between vision and values. And in doing this, as we have with so many churches, I think the one place where some churches can come to the end of the journey and really not create a plan that makes a difference is because in their vision they said nothing, and in their values they said everything. In their vision they just said what they're supposed to say. They vision statements like, we're going to love God, we're going to love people, we're going to save the world.
Amen.
Great. Okay, so that's so broad. There's no path. That's really just a restatement of the mission. That's not a vision. That's not telling us where we're going and the uniqueness of our congregation, how God's equipped us. And so we want them to pick a path. We want them to identify the church they're supposed to become, but then the values have to come along and not just affirm everything we think is good. The values have to come along and identify, if we're going to be that church, this is what has to matter here. And the truth is, we're not that church right now. And so our current idea of values probably does not connect with the church we need to become fully. There's some things missing in our culture. And this is where talking about the behaviors, that as they were talking about earlier, it's so very important to start thinking about this. So the first thing I would just add to what Ron was sharing on values is you've got to challenge the tables to find the alignment. When I do this with them, we start getting feedback. Certainly when they come back after they've done their work and they come back to the next retreat to report, I tell them, you're going to share your vision and your values in this moment. We go table by table. The work that you've done, all I'm listening for is, will those values lead to the vision? If that's your priorities, if you become the church that cares about that, what's going to result is the church of the vision. So you're helping them. Obviously we're encouraging, we're pushing a little bit here to make sure that we are actually aiming for a path that's going to lead to the destination we believe God has for us. So alignment really matters. The second thing, and Ron touched on it just a moment ago, some of the things I've been trying to do more recently in some of my groups is when they give me their values, I want to ask them, so what's that look like? What would it look like in our church if we really were living authentically? Think a little bit about the mental picture. How do we know when we're there? We all preach sermons that motivate, but sometimes don't give a whole lot of understanding of what it would look like if I actually lived this way. We challenge people to ideas without painting a picture. Well, don't let your teams create ideas without defining what's it look like in action. What does this look like? I give a quick illustration and then I'll give the microphone back. Church I pastored. I was sitting in a deacon meeting. It was in the early months of my pastorate, and this congregation, without getting into all the detail of it, at this particular stage was an aging congregation. Average age was easily in the upper 50s, if not early 60s. And, we had 3 babies in the nursery. And we were paying a girl $20 a week to sit with the 3 babies because we didn't have the congregational energy to staff a 3-baby nursery. That's kind of where we were at that particular point. But I'm sitting in a deacon meeting, and one of my deacons, who's in his 60s, but he's a teacher at the local high school. At the start of the meeting, before the meeting started, he is passionately talking about what he wants to see happen in the lives of young people. I mean, he's in tears. He's watching them walk down a Wichita high school hallway every single day, aimless and in need of direction. And we got to invest in young people. We got to invest in young people. We got to invest in young people. Now, understand, in our church, one of the values that seemed evident is when you pull onto our property, the front 5 to 7 parking spots had signs there that said reserved for senior adult. Now, do you understand why that's there? Well, sure, because one of the values was, providing, a shorter walk, helping our senior adults. But when you walked into the sanctuary, or the auditorium more accurately, walked into the auditorium, going down front 2 rows, there are hard plastic signs that are Velcro to the back of each of those seats that said reserved for senior adults. Now, those of us who were younger at that particular time couldn't sit in those seats because that hurt. But they were those signs. So I'll ask my groups, I'm telling the story. I said, if you walked into that church and you're a 20-something young couple and you saw all the best parking spots are for senior adults, and you walked into the auditorium and saw all the front seats were for senior adults, and you look around the room and you see more gray hair than any other color, what are you thinking about the priorities of this church? And yet, sitting in that deacon meeting, one of my deacons, who's on the edge of that reality in his own life, is passionately sharing his heart for young people. sometimes our values and our visible behaviors don't connect. So what happened that night, we went on with our deacon meeting, and I made the same mistake in 3 straight deacon meetings at the start of my tenure as a pastor. First 3 deacon meetings, I ended the deacon meeting with the question, anything else? I did that 3 times, and all 3 times I wished I hadn't done that. I learned the importance of an established agenda. But I said that again. And that same guy who had started the meeting at the beginning, before we got started, was weeping over the concern he had for teenagers, says, Pastor, we got a problem. So what's our problem? And by the way, the other 2 times, he had also been the one to speak up and say, Pastor, we had a problem. He had a different problem. Each deacon meeting has a different Pastor, we got a problem. What's the problem? We got teenagers that are sitting down front in those seats reserved for seniors. Same guy. And I kind of sat there hoping that the others would connect the dots to the incongruency of before the meeting and now, but they didn't seem to. And so I said, well, Bill, let's call him Bob. Well, Bob?
Perfect.
Every church I've ever been in thought it was a good thing when the teenagers wanted to sit down front.
That's right.
He got up and walked out.
Oh.
I mean, didn't say a word, just walked out abruptly. And I thought, three months as pastor, I've already lost a deacon. Didn't hear the front door though. And a few minutes later, he walked back into the office where we were meeting, and he had all those plastic signs in his hand. And he just tossed them in the trash. And he said, Pastor, you have no idea where those went. Now, please understand, in no way am I suggesting that we shouldn't place a value on our older adults. In no way am I suggesting any of that behavior was wrongly motivated. See, sometimes in these behaviors the guys are talking about identifying behaviors, they're actually behaviors for good reasons, but they're getting in the way of the passion of our heart. They're getting in the way of the church that we desire to become. If you were to drive onto that church campus today, I mean, this has been 19 years ago now, those signs out front of the parking spot are still there. Because they continue to provide special parking for our senior adults. But sometimes even our best behaviors don't connect. So that's why I push them the question, what's it look like? What would it look like if we are living this out? And that sometimes helps stir a little bit of maybe what we're doing over here is counterproductive. The second thing I just want to talk and say to this, how important are the values? If you don't identify the values of the house, people will live by their own. If you don't identify what we care about, what we prioritize here, then folks will live according to their own set of values. That's why these are so very, very important, and why we got to do a good job with these. So, that friendliness situation, Ron used the hat guy, all that continues to happen as long as people live by their own values. Because that old codger, he was acting out of his own values, but not out of the values of the house. And so just a couple of things I'd throw in. Ron?
Thank you so much, Mike. Isn't that great stuff? There's a video clip we usually show. We kind of determined not to show many of those this time. But there's a video clip that kind of just really describes what happens when values really become a part of somebody's life. If you've got that ready, let's watch it.
We don't get the words, we'll make our own.
That's right. Sitting in the crowd of thousands at the Arizona Diamondbacks game, a 12-year-old boy watching the game, about to do something that would catch not only their eyes in the announcer's booth, but ours too. We couldn't believe what we were seeing. It was the 4th inning. A player tosses the ball into the stands. 2 little boys wanted it, but only Ian McMillan would get it.
Oh, look at that young Brewers fan. Now, wait a minute. Did he get it? Oh, boy.
He is sour. The Diamondback fan got it.
The announcers watching were their own play-by-play.
Huh? Oh, he's bumped
Are you
up.
kidding me? This kid's going to do this?
That is big.
Oh my goodness.
What a nice young man.
Well, he's got a Diamondbacks hat. We have to get something for that kid. I can't believe I just witnessed that. That's just
awesome.
You young men are a star.
The game would go on, Ian having given up his prize catch. Then a phone call. It seemed someone had seen his kindness on TV.
Being told right now that he's being praised on TV.
Yeah, he's big league.
Late today, we met Ian too.
I thought it was the right thing to do. Like, I saw the kid, he was really sad, so I decided just to give the ball back. My mom and my dad, taught me that way, so it's kind of just, natural.
Ian didn't leave that game empty-handed. Moments after giving that ball away, the announcers had a special gift for the fan. A baseball bat signed by his favorite player.
An autograph bat and a contract for the generous Ian and his buddies.
The box was really, really cool. I was, really surprised, and, I did not see that coming.
He's got a good home trainer.
Yeah, that's a very well-bred young man.
If you do good things will happen to you.
Reminding us all that often what you give
Nice going, young man.
delivers far more in return, even a little more could imagine. And so we choose Ian McMillan with a lesson for us all. And we learned late today that after talking to us, he was off to throw out the first pitch at tonight's Diamondbacks game.
All right. I hope you heard him say, I was taught that it's just natural to do that. His parents were not there. What are we believing God to help us do is help every church develop a set of values that they not only can embrace, but begin to live out. Would it be incredible if people in the community would say, I know you go to that church because people that go to your church, that's how they act. That's how they behave. Because the values have become so much an integral part of who we are. And so we in retreat too, with our whole coming to terms with core values. They will have written a set of values and begin to write definitions for those, and their homework assignment out of retreat too then will be coming back to us with those values. After you're coming, or Mike's coming. And we're going to move into the beginning of retreat 3 together now, and begin to talk about the strategic plan for ministry, how important that is.
So when Doug Clay was selected by the vote of the people to become the 13th General Superintendent of the Assemblies of God, he came in and we had the first couple of days together as an executive leadership team. He said, Alton, I want you to take those first 4 questions that you use in Acts 2, and I want you to lead our team through that exercise to create mission, vision, and values, not for the Assemblies of God, but for the national office. So, my point is, when you really get into what this is all about, this becomes something you are, not just something that's an appendage out there. So we created a vision statement and a mission statement, and then we created a series of values. Our way of doing it was one word value with a descriptor at the bottom. Then he restructured the Tuesday chapel service. For many years, at least all the years I've been here, chapel was primarily a worship service. And it was a service that we would just come and have a speaker after we had worship. Occasionally we'd have other things. But what he did was restructure those 4, typically 4, there's more than 5 at some points, and that had a special designation as well. First Tuesday was a typical worship service. The second Tuesday, at least for the first few months, every time it's called a leadership chapel, but for the first few months, each of us took one of the values and taught a lesson on that value to the whole campus. So that's exactly what Ron and Mike were talking about. They were talking about how you preach this and get it involved. Then I recommend, and I know they do as well, anytime you can tie an activity back to a value, when you're announcing the activity, also announce the value. So if you take an offering, and then later in the service you take another missions offering, if you had a value of radical generosity, you say, practicing our value of radical generosity, we're taking 2 offerings today. Well, the person who's going to complain about you taking 2 offerings, you've just neutralized. I was going to say neutered, that just didn't sound. You just neutralized their objection by saying this is one of our values. So if you're going to do any, we will do, let me see if I can quote one that kind of comes to mind because several people are using a similar one. But we will do anything short of immoral or illegal to reach the lost or whatever, you know. Then when you have some weird activity that's weird to a traditional person, you could say, we're living out this value next Saturday by having, you know, whatever you're going to have. Those things sound simple, but that's casting vision. And that's casting vision. Somebody said, well, I don't know how to cast vision. Out of the abundance of your heart, the mouth speaks. Whatever you're preoccupied with, you'll talk about. You have to tell the people you're training, this is not a one-shot deal. My brother-in-law has gone so far with this principle. He pastors, Johanna's brother, pastors a great church in Grand Rapids, that he starts with the children. They have written a song about the values of their church. These children come out of children's church singing the values. And they're not just babysitting. From the moment they can understand and talk, they've got these little baseball cards where you trade cards. They've got those values all on these trade cards that they trade in. I mean, they are taking it down to that level. Every child that goes to their super church can tell you the values of their church. Then he goes right on into the youth, right on into the adults. They've got literature. They've got a whole picture book for the children on the growing. I mean, it's as endless as you want it to be. Let creativity flow. As long as you're channeling the creativity, as Mike was saying a while ago, to stay in alignment. Stay in alignment. Then you can neutralize a lot of negativism. Because you're just living your values. And if you're not living your values, you can eliminate activity that's not contributing to them. So, what we haven't said, but I always try at some point to connect. At some point, I wish I could have named this, I wish I had a longer name. Spirit-empowered church. Everything we've talked about corporately so far, think about it, could be applied personally. Why wouldn't you have as a person your own mission? Why did God create me? Why does my life matter? Every morning when my feet hit the floor, do I have a mission? Create you a set of values. Revisit them every year. How did I do this year living out the values that I claim I have? I talked to a church some time ago, and the youth pastor was sitting there, and I talked about the 40 outcomes that Dr. Ferguson was talking about, is in the back of his book. He said, Alton, when I went back the next time, he said, I took those 40 outcomes in every youth service. I said, this next week, we're going to practice. We're going to do the book. We're going to do this one outcome for the whole week. So you've got these people living out what they say they believe. You don't have to be draconian. I mean, Ron's got a set. Oh, excuse me. Just about sell that sucker again. Thank you, Tom. Appreciate you. Yeah, I don't want to autograph it. They might not want it. But he's got some values that God kind of birthed on his heart for pastors, and this is how you personalize. I mean, you think about this. If you could get everybody personalizing that, and then get them into the corporate.
I just wanted to mention this. Alton said it's been 4 or 5 years ago now that I woke up really early one morning, about 4:30 in the morning, which is early for me, and I felt like the Lord gave me these values or behaviors. Because my concern was that we can't change churches till we change how pastors behave. And so I felt like the Lord gave this to me, and I don't say that lightly because, I'm not mystical and I'm not really as spiritual as Alton and Mike. And so when I say that, it's really something that's meaningful to me. Let me just quickly go over, and they'll be available to you at the end of our day. A passionate commitment. We turn from minimal expectations, chase excellence in everything we do, and challenge those we lead to give their best to the work of the kingdom. Continuous improvement. We never stop learning and growing, but respond to every opportunity to reach our full kingdom potential. Cultural honor. We honor those that have laid the path before us and bless those who labor among us as we embrace a new generation before us. Vision. We believe God has a plan for every church and ministry, and we are committed to discover and implement that plan. Holy Spirit empowerment. We desperately seek the power of the Holy Spirit, the only means by which we can reach the lost and fulfill the commission we've been given. Extravagant faith. We live in full anticipation that God will do in our church and ministry those things we are willing to believe Him for and trust Him to do. Outward focus. We actively share in Christ's mission to reach those outside our church rather than remain mired in the self-focus of personal preferences and comfort. Abundance paradigm. We embrace life with an open hand and not a clenched fist, knowing that God will provide what we need to fulfill His will. Interdependence. This is one I'm just believing God for in this culture, our culture, the Assemblies of God, and other cultures that are here. We commit to serve one another and cease to compete so we can help each other succeed. Servant leadership. We are free to serve people with a pure heart because we are secure in who God has made us to be. Take that and use that however you need to do with pastors in your area. But it's something that the Lord put in my heart because pastors have got to start behaving in these ways, and we're going to see churches change. So, amen.
Amen. So we have led you now through Retreat 1 and Retreat 2. We're going to look at Retreat 3. This is where everything comes together. Everything comes together. So whatever they've been working on, sometimes they haven't connected the dots yet. But when they get to Retreat 3, everything comes together. This is the most important retreat of all. If a team misses this retreat, if they don't have a personal one-on-one consultation to catch them up, it's pretty much over for them. There's no reason to come to Retreat 4. So what I'm trying to say is it is important And when you give away things free, as we typically have done lately, it's easy not to value it as much as if they had a financial investment. So if they're going to drop out, they will drop out here pretty much. We don't have a big attrition rate, to be honest. There's not very many people that drop out. But some do occasionally. We've had one church that I'm aware of that stated their reason for leaving is because, as I think Ron dealt with it yesterday, they came to the conclusion, well, actually, that's not true. The team didn't want to drop out. It was the pastor who believed that if you were spirit-led, you had to be spontaneous. And that you couldn't plan ahead because that would be defeating scriptural and spiritual input. So we go back again, as I told you, we review, so I'm not going to do the review the way we might in a retreat. But we go back and we actually do all this all over again because we want them to really get this in their heart, in their mind. I mean, these are important things. If in the morning we get to where I think we're going to be, I'm going to have Mike come back and revisit a piece of that vision piece. Dr. Clarenceau has a wonderful illustration of a church that he pastored and how he cast vision. And it's a great story to help you because we need to help people live out these things in a way that they are comfortable with because their personality, their ability, but he has another way. It's on the video in case we don't get to it. It's if in the training, it's on his piece on vision. But the alignment is so important. Look at this. Somebody asked me this question yesterday. Do we invest our time and energy in trying to get people back up that side of the life cycle? I said, wherever you are, when you get ready to build a new life cycle, that peak is always higher than that peak. So what you're trying to do is breathe new life. And how does new life come? It comes with fresh vision. And comes with relationship. So we're believing that leap of faith can occur and that team can help build that bridge of hope. That's what it's all about. I keep that in front of them all the time because they've been beat down, pushed down, failed so many times, struggling, maybe conflict. All of these things just drain and suck the life out of them. So you are trying, if you're doing a consultation or a leader or training, I don't think we settle on a word, but facilitate. You're trying to build hope, a confident expectation of something good that's going to happen. So here we try to put a scriptural underpinning to the value. Now we probably overkill just a little bit here, so you can kind of feel your way along to see how much of this you might need, but we put it in there. It's all in your notes, and if it's not in yours, it is, I think, but you can look over in the student notes. We're trying to show them that this is not foreign to a scriptural context. This is kind of supported in Scripture, you know. Then we just give them some visuals. A visual of how that we take these values and we're going to push that up through this 5-function activity to reach our vision. Those are the kinds of things we're trying to show. We're trying to show some visuals to keep. Here's another visual. You've got a train on a track. You've got the priorities there. You've got the leadership team and the engine. You've got the congregation back in the train. You've got the biblical functions as the fuel. We're trying. One thing that we do say is that when you view an Amtrak or a train wreck, unless there's some kind of avalanche or something that was unforeseen and happened without their involvement. The primary reason that a train has a wreck is that the speed of the vehicle could not be accommodated by the tracks. So if the core value does not support this whole effort, that's what Mike was saying a while ago. These core values, they're everything. But they have got to point toward your mission. And I haven't even shared this with the team, but the book I referred to yesterday when I started out with Canoeing the Mountains, he talks about all personal preferences have to yield or bow to the mission. Mission trumps everything. So in a way, if you really just get down to talking, your mission, your vision, and your values, you could almost aggregate collectively, that's your mission. I mean, that's what really drives you. That's everything. Now, we distinctly separate them. But if those, what about Katrina? New Orleans, the Ninth Ward wasn't destroyed because of the surge. If you've read it, you know it was the levee system. It gave way from internal, not external. So we know there's a devil fighting us. But let me tell you, so much of the defeat of the church will not come from the devil fighting. In fact, historically, the church has always succeeded during persecution. 1949, when the communists wiped out, or tried to wipe out Christianity and all of the religions from China, there were 750,000 believers, best they can calculate, in China. Then when Mao Zedong did this cultural revolution for 10 years, they tried to wipe out all vestiges of counter-revolutionary activity. So they destroyed churches, they burned Bibles, they burned songbooks, they imprisoned pastors. And when that bamboo curtain began to crack a little bit and open up, that church had not shrunk from 750,000. It had grown to several million. And today, they claim that 35,000 people a day are coming to Christ in China. Hallelujah. And so China right now is trying to impose more restrictions on the church. And I say, well, I know the hardship is there, but they don't understand. The devil is not real smart. He never wins. Because he's going to flood that place with more victory. So we don't want something internal to destroy us, like misalignment, failure to live our values, not articulating our values correctly. So we're going to take a break. In the afternoon, we kind of let you go quickly, but we've already been here an hour. And when the break comes back, then Mike's going to come back and he's going to lead you through the construction of a strategic plan. And he's going to remember, we're walking down through the 10 questions. We've been through question 3 now. We're getting ready to do question 4, but we're going to explore the rest of the questions as we move through that. Does that make sense? Yes, sir.
I just want to reiterate something that you mentioned earlier today, in that, and maybe even yesterday, that you're encouraging the teams and the pastors not to piecemeal this, to release it out, because you're building toward the strategic plan. And one of the reasons that you go back and review each retreat in this cohort is that you're giving these teams an opportunity to tweak some of the things, maybe in language or clarity. You're giving them feedback amongst the teams, so that when they get to the finished product, they're not dealing with something that's really needing a lot of editing at that point. So you help them work on that between the retreats, obviously, but then in the retreats, you're kind of being that sounding board as a facilitator to help them come up with a finished product so that when they're doing this strategic plan, they don't have to undo something they've already put in print, they've already been preaching about it, and then they're like, oh, well, now that doesn't work. So it's a process.
Great point. Greg Perkins is he's actually full-time in this position in the Southern Missouri District just to do church health, right? Or you got another portfolio? Church health. And so he's got a team. In fact, Jim and Barbara are part of his team, and they're doing exactly what I talked about. They're one. So he has some experience. Great point. Because I said yesterday, Mike, I really try to get the pastors to, I know they want to, but they grab something out of a retreat and want to go preach it Sunday. And we really are trying to hold this down. Now, you also have to deal with the fact that you don't want the other people in the congregation thinking that the people on the vision team are trying to be some kind of exclusionary group who think they're an elite group that, you know, God specially blesses them and they've got an inside track with the pastor or whatever. You got to deal with all that sometimes, but you can do that. But that he's right, because we're continually, I've had people say all the way down to the retreat 3, man, I didn't connect the dots. But boy, now I do. And I need to go back and change something that I previously thought. And that's what he's talking about. That's why it's so important. And when we get back after the break, here's how I'm going to close the break. It's very presumptuous for me to do this. It's maybe got other adjectives you can put to it. But I've had, let's go say many. It's not many. I was going to say one. It's more than that. My mother's in heaven, so she's not participating in this. But I've talked about them destroying my piano. So somebody said, are you going to play the piano? So I'm going to start the next session. And I know that's presumptuous. I'm not going to sing. Somebody asked for that. That's gone. I preach too much to people like you. That's what it's all about. I have nothing to sell, although I do. They're not out there on the table, I understand. But, they're on eBay, yeah. So a friend of mine called me and sent me a text. That's what Tommy's talking about. I told this in his district. And said, Alton, they're selling 5-year-old record albums on eBay. And I said, fantastic. That's good. You make eBay. That's good. I clicked over and sure enough, 5 albums. Oh, them, albums. Those things that we don't have anymore. Vinyl. And I was feeling pretty good about myself until I looked at the opening bid. 90, what was it? 90 cents? 99 cents. All 5. Not a piece, but all 5. So trust me, guys, when you can take a person's sum total of their talent and put it on eBay for under $1, ego is not your issue. You need encouragement. So go get something to drink. Go to the bank.
Nice. How about that? That's pretty funny.
That is funny.
Oh, gosh. Lovely. 99 cents.
He's a ham.
He's a ham.
That was probably harder to play that first one than this
That's what
one.
he was saying over here. It's probably harder to play it on. He sounds like a Jimmy Swagger type. How is he and Mike Murdoch and all those guys connected? Do you know?
Over Southwest Virginia.
So Mike Murdoch here. Mike Murdoch on Twitter or something. He said, here's my friend playing. It was him. Mike Murdoch was in the audience. He was playing on the...
There was no finer pastor than Mike Murdoch today.
Really?
Solid, godly man. Mike was at the wrong end of the gene pool.
Say what?
He was at the wrong end of the gene pool.
He's still going, isn't he? Mike Murdoch's still going. I used to watch him on TV. He would be on video, old, like from 10 years ago. He would be on video.
There's a big place in the street for me, the Argonne.
The Wisdom Center? The Wisdom?
It's in Alton City. Still not far away.
Just write the check. We're going to do something now that we changed our mind. We changed our mind. This is not the Holy Grail. So we're going to take a departure from this book because we're always wanting to test and beta test and go. And so you're our first beta test on this. Dr. Clarensaw, who led this ministry for quite some time before he went back to Southwestern, was looking at these 10 questions, and his summarization of it was that these questions might be something he wanted to try and answer them in sequential order, because in Retreat 3, we answered them with Connect, Grow, Serve, Go, Worship, or Connect, Grow, Serve, Worship, Go. So he put them back in order, and so in your fold, the little, hold that up, in that is where it's called, there is a supplemental addendum to this particular document. Does it have a title to it?
5 strategic questions.
What's the title, Mike? The 5 strategic questions. Oh, if you have it, hold it up. Okay. So we're going to teach. A lot of the material will sound similar to what's in here. It'll be a different order, and it'll be taught with his style. He taught this way in Dr. Ferguson's office. They liked it. I heard it. I liked it. So we're doing it that way. Mike, come and take us through this exercise. Thank you.
When Dr. Garrison did that same song in Sagu Chapel about a month ago, 6 weeks ago, he was in Sagu Chapel, and the 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old young adults in that auditorium were on their feet, were in the aisles, were screaming, were shouting. It was the most overwhelming chapel response that I've seen in my 5 years. It was even a bigger response than the day we announced we're getting Chick-fil-A on campus. I mean, it was phenomenal. And so, great, great stuff. And I want to just say real quick as we jump in, it really is a privilege to be back and be a part of this with you guys and be able to participate with this team. If you know Alton Garrison, Ron McManus personally, you know that this isn't a job. This is who they are. You take them to dinner, this is what you're talking about. I mean, this is, they eat, sleep, and I've worked with these guys now 9 years in this effort. And I appreciate them so much because of the congruency of who they are and what they say, and just that passion that they have for churches. I had an original goal in 2010 when I first went back to the national office that I wanted to download Ron McManus. I wanted everything in his brain to somehow get in my brain. And after 5 years, I gave up on that and went somewhere that was less challenging, and that was to be an academic dean. Because I can spend the rest of my life trying to learn everything that man knows. And so appreciate these guys so much. I know you do as well. And it really is a joy, a privilege to be back with them. What we're looking at here in Retreat 3, and Alton showed you in some of the early slides, certainly reminding. One of the things I always do at every retreat is take that first slide and remind everybody in the room that our church doesn't change if I don't change. That this business of change starts with me. And I think that's an important thing, especially in this retreat, because when we start getting into strategy, we are talking about stuff we want to change. And I don't want us to get lost in the stuff we're going to change at church and forget about the fact that I'm the one that really needs to be changing, not just stuff at church. And so I want to emphasize that. The next few slides that he went through there, particularly when he got to the verses of talking about planning, you know, it is a thing in many of our churches at least,
least, I don't know if it is in some of yours, but in many of our churches, this confusion between what is spiritual and what is spontaneous. And a lot of churches do come to this with, should we have a plan? Terrible question. The better question is, do you think God has a plan for our church? And if so, do you think He'd let you in on it? And that's what we're after here. We're only looking for God's plan. We're not looking for our plan. And so you want to emphasize that in the beginnings of this retreat. As you start getting into Retreat 3, you want to talk a lot about how we are after one thing. We're after what God wants to do in our church. We believe we've heard from Him on vision. We believe we've identified values that will help us become that. Now we're looking for strategies that will help us get there. Some of those strategies will be built around our values. Some of those strategies primarily will be built primarily around our 5 functions. And so when we come to Retreat 3, there's some great material that's in the notebook originally. What I started doing was kind of looking at this and looking at the 5 functions and asking these questions in a very intentional order. And so I just want to walk through them. I'm certainly not going to try to do today all we would do in the retreat. One of the things about Retreat 3 is this is also your opportunity to see some of these areas with your own practical wisdom. The chance for you to talk a little bit about worship and evangelism. And what you're trying to do is seed their thinking, because the end result is they are going to build a plan. We're going to ask them to identify 3 to 5 to 7 steps they want to take over the next few years in each of these 5 areas. We're going to ask them to think about, we asked them early on to dream. I dream of a church where worship is this. Well, in our circles at least, I think some of you know what I'm talking about here, we're really good at the dream, not so good at the plan. This is another reason why we don't unveil the work along the way in the local church. We don't want to go to the congregation with a sense of vision until we can also show them we have a plan to get there. And that's another reason why we hold it back. But there's a group of people at every table that we have been frustrating throughout this journey so far. These are the people that want to do something. These are the people that agreed to come because they thought it would mean we would fix the sanctuary bathrooms, or that we would upgrade the children's ministry, or that we would get a better guitar player, or something that we think we need to do in order to be a more effective church. So many of these folks, even though they do understand generally the process we're in, it's been tough to just talk about things we think and feel without talking about what are we going to do. And so I like to start this retreat encouraging those friends that this is the moment you've been waiting for. This is the chance to roll up our sleeves and figure out what practical steps are we going to take to do that. And I think it's very, very important that even though it often comes toward the end of our list when we talk about the 5 functions, the very first function we want to address and talk about is the one that deals with this question. How are we going to engage new people? How do we engage new people? It's the evangelism. It's the go question. You'll probably remember from Retreat 1, most of our churches identified evangelism as the one thing of the 5 that they struggle with the most. Many of them will also say it's the one thing pastor preaches about the most, but it's the one thing that we do the least. We're going to start there, not because of that, but because of how critical this is to the entire reality of chasing a new life cycle. So what I like to remind them of is that, okay, cool, I wasn't expecting that. That's the new life cycle model. Okay, cool, my notes have the old one. Okay, well, what I like to remind them of is that the new life cycle comes with fresh vision connected to new relationships. If you're going to have a new life cycle, you're going to have new life. There is no new life cycle if it's just the same old bunch. And so, to start a new life cycle, you absolutely must have new life. In fact, I don't have it on a slide, but I like to share with them a statistic, a piece of data that I've researched that's absolutely true. I'd like to share with them that 100% of the growth potential of your church is in people who aren't there yet. I did the math. 100% of the growth potential of our church is in people who aren't here yet. We talk about the key catalyst for church health is outward focus. But here's what I want to make sure we understand in that reality. We don't just need to be an outward focused church, we have to be outward focused people. An outward focused church, a truly outward focused church, is filled with outward focused people. So my hope as I get started in answering this question is I don't just want to come up with a fresh set of evangelism strategies for our church. I don't want to just come up with maybe a new event idea or a new way to go bang on doors or a new way to do whatever it is we are doing together. What I'm thinking is, how do we, meaning us, meaning the congregation, how do we help them become outward focused people? How do we engage their world? How do we help them begin to think this way? And so I just kind of started listing some of the places we engage new people, where they engage them. One of the best places to engage new people are among those folks we already know. Already through relationships, people that we've already connected to. How can and I want you to catch the distinction here, because trying to emphasize this in the last few sessions I've been doing, and there's a mind shift here. A mind shift in that our evangelism strategy is not just trying to get people to do what we are doing as a church, but it's trying to get the church to facilitate what they could do in their own outward focused lives. How do we train our people to be outward focused? I heard a stat on the radio, and unfortunately I don't have the source, but I think it was Tom Rainer that said in America today, 92% of church-going people have no intention of sharing their faith with anybody.
Wow.
Now, I like to think that in our fellowship we're better than that. I like to think our number is lower. I think ours is about 88%. But nonetheless, a lot of folks are not wired. They're not even thinking about the kingdom of God and its purposes when they walk off our property. And so how can we help them? And one of the things that I think is very important is facilitating their ability to invest strategically in the lives of their friends. Connecting them to the people in our lives. Let me illustrate this by something I just saw a church in Texas do. It's actually the church that my wife and I attend when we're not traveling. And I love this idea. We just came through the wonderful celebratory season of Halloween. We love that at the church, and that brings out personal convictions and all that kind of thing. But this church had in the past done a big event at the church property, Harvest Festival, we're going to call it, blow up toys, all that kind of stuff. This year they said, you know what, we're not doing that. Instead, we're going to set up the people of our church, anybody who wants to, we're going to facilitate them hosting such an event in their front yard, in their neighborhood. They raised money, they did all this different things, so I think there were 10 or 12 locations in our community where the people hosted the event in their neighborhood. The church provided the resources to help, to help rent the blow-up toys, some of the food items that were available, to help the people minister to people in their lives where they're at, because what they want to do is help the people become more outward focused. And I began to look at that thing. That's the whole idea. In our church in Wichita, we started a single parent care day. And I wished I'd had all this figured out when we first started it, because then I would feel smart. But what we backed into realizing is what we were doing was we were setting up our people to reach out to these single moms in their lives. And we would tell them, you invite them, you come with them, you be a part of the day with them. We will facilitate what you are doing in that relationship and set them up to be more outward focused. Because the end game is our people become outward focused, not that our church just has more effective events. And so this is the question. How can we, this is a strategic question. How do we engage new people? How can we help our church people recognize the opportunities that are there? I like to remind them that evangelism is not what we pay the pastor to do. And churches that hire staff pastors in evangelism, that's not why we did that, so that they would do the evangelism. We brought these folks in to equip us to be more effective in our efforts to build relationships with kingdom purpose. So This is where Friend Day events. This is where, different types of ways to invest. The crazy thing with that Single Parent Day, where we would have these moms come in, and we had, the youth group washing their cars, the men changing the oil. We had, ladies that professionally cut hair there to cut haircuts for mom and the kids for free. We're doing all these different things all day long, about 12 different ways we want to bless them. We found the community got excited about doing that kind of stuff. And we discussed, after a couple of years, we were ministering to 200, 250 moms and about 600 to 700 children, and it didn't cost the church a dime because the community paid for the whole thing.
Wow.
Because people get behind when they see the church doing what they think the church ought to be doing. They get behind that. What I'm saying to you is, how can we facilitate our people to become more outward focused? Now, certainly it's going to include other things we will do congregationally when we begin to build this strategy. But the question is not, how should we do evangelism? The question is, how do we engage new people? Because if we don't engage new people, there will be no new life cycle. Yes, praise God, we want the old people to stay. We want the existing congregation to be a part of this. They are a part of that. But if we don't connect with anybody new, there will not be a new life cycle. And so we're looking at that. One of the ways we talk about doing this as well is looking across throughout the neighborhood. How many churches that you're connected with have no relationship whatsoever with the neighbors around their property? Or maybe demographically, there's been such a change in the neighborhood and the congregation hasn't changed along with it. And now we've got a pocket of this ethnic group or this economic status group that meets for worship, and they have nothing in common with the neighbors outside the church's immediate door. How can we engage new people? Trying to get our people. You're going to bring your own questions, your own ideas, your own thoughts to this conversation, but the goal is to get our people engaging new people. This is our evangelism question. One of my favorite things to think about here is to think about what your church does well. What does your church do well? And when you know what your church does well, how can you take that outside the walls of your church and engage new people? In my experience, when we're doing what we do well, people like us more. When we're doing what we do poorly, people aren't nearly as attracted to us. What do you do well? Think about it. Usually when I'm leading this all eyes tables, tell me, what's your church do well? Got some good teachers? Well, frankly, if I've got to come to your church to experience that, I probably never will. But if you take one of those really good teachers and you give that lady a quarter off from her Sunday school class or whatever setting she's committed to, and you set her up in the basement of the bank building to teach parenting to the community, you're going to change that lady because she's going to experience using her gifts outside the walls of the church. And it's going to make her more outward focused. It's going to allow you to impact your community in a new way. You got teenagers that put together a band and you don't know what to do with them on Sunday because they scare the rest of the congregation. Take them to the park. Set them up in the community. Let them use their gifts out there. There are so many gifts inside the church, and yet we never let those gifts outside the walls of the church. Anybody got ladies that cook really well? Look how fat we've gotten eating all that. Take that outside. Let them begin to set up that opportunity in other moments where they can invest in the community. Because when people start using their gifts outside the walls, it changes them. We were doing this several years ago. I think it was in Oklahoma. And I had gone table to table and said, tell me what you're good at. And there was all kinds of, we have great worship, we're great this, we're great that, we're great that. And right over here to my left, in the very corner, there was a church that hadn't said anything yet. And I made a mistake as the leader of trying to draw them out. I should have left them alone. Probably would have been less embarrassing for them. But I turned to them and I said, what about you guys? What do you do well? Well, now at the table is a pastor and his wife that I think were approaching 70. The folks around the table that they brought to the meeting were all kind of in that same generation. Sweet people, loving people, faithful to God people. But they looked at me as though they had no answer. And that's when I realized I probably shouldn't have done that. What do you guys do well? And I was standing up here trying to strategize, how do I get out of this, moment when the pastor's wife blurts out, funerals! kind of laughed, kind of like some of you did. And I said, what do you mean you do funerals well? And the pastor's wife said, Our Ladies do an incredible funeral dinner. And we're a rural community. Our guys, many of them don't have a suit, or they got one suit, but they dress their best, and they come and they help us host that family, and they love that family. And frankly, she said, my husband, he's a good preacher on Sunday, but he's a great preacher at a funeral. And he started to slide down in his seat and realized he'll have to die to bring out his best. He was feeling a bit awkward about that. And before I could connect the dots, standing up here, she connected the dots. You know what we could do? We could call the local funeral home and tell them anytime there's a family that doesn't have the support of a church, that we're ready. We would be very glad to do the meal, to do the funeral, to host them. We could call our small town local funeral home, and immediately a strategy was born. How do we engage new people? And I asked her, I said, how often do you think that happens? She said, well, it's probably going to happen once or twice a month in our town. And a strategy was born among a congregation that didn't think they had a whole lot of strengths. But they could take what they do well and do it out there. Do it for the community. So this is question. I want to take a little more time with this question than I will with the others. But what you do well, you see some of the notes in there. Forgive me, I'm going to just kind of fly through here. But some of these are, you'll get them just by looking at what you think is on the list there. If it's serving, do it out there. If it's music, do it out there. Whatever the gifts are. Again, this is in the little, I don't even know where this particular slide might be, but it's there in these special notes. What a church does well needs to be visible in its community. How do we engage new people? So when I'm asking them for an evangelism strategy, this is what I'm talking about. How are we going to get our people to engage outside our walls? This is going to be the key catalyst. The key catalyst to a new life cycle. When we put together, and we'll talk about it tomorrow, when we put together the Acts 2 Church Survey, which is a way to assess how your church is doing in Spirit-empowered church life, there's particularly these 5 functions. We discovered in the research part of that the single greatest factor to church health, almost a one-to-one relationship, meaning every step we take down this road is a step down the road of greater church health. The number one factor was outward focus in our community engagement. But it's not just the church as an entity getting out there, it's the people discovering a purpose as they live for Christ in the out there. That's question number 1. I'm going to hustle, like I said, through the others. So what we'll ask them to do is begin to answer this question. So what are you going to do? And in the notes, we've added some things that will facilitate that. We've talked about things they can be talking about, but how can we do this? How can we engage new people? None of the rest of these matter if we don't engage new people. You see, I found, and I know you'll understand this, but I found that usually it's not better answers we need in the church, it's better questions. That when you're asking the right questions, the answers aren't that hard. In fact, I remind myself a lot, I'm in an academic environment, but I remind myself a lot that Jesus handed this thing off to fishermen. So how hard can it really be? If you fish, forgive me, I don't want that. Anyway, I'm just saying. This is not an academic pursuit. This is see the right things, ask the right questions. The answers aren't that hard. The right answers are, how can we connect that guy to Jesus? How can I make friends with that neighbor? How can I engage? We got to get our people asking those questions. That very much needs to be a part of our strategy in the area of evangelism. Does that make sense? Are you tracking with me here? This is thinking beyond what's normal. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but I've actually found a lot of churches that have a lot of evangelism events, in truth, they're very inward focused. Mm-hmm. Because they're all trying to get people inside their building rather than getting their people outside their building. Yeah. There's a whole lot of y'all come rather than very much a go. And the Great Commission is a go, not a y'all come. Mm-hmm. Now, sure, we're excited about Sunday. We want folks to come. We want folks to come be a part of the family. Our later goals fit that. landslide effort of our congregation to get out there and to impact their world. Sunday is just a chance to gather up the harvest, see what God's doing, celebrate that, and encourage each other. The game starts Monday. The game starts when we walk out the door. Sunday's just practice. Sunday's just practice. It's not the game. And our congregations need to understand that if they're going to be healthy. The second question then follows right on the heels of that. Thinking about those same people. How do we engage new people? Then question 2 is our connect question. Then how will we treat them when they walk in our doors? How will we treat them? So Tom's been in his neighborhood. He's been reaching out to, he's just been building friendships. He's been caring about people. Neighbors are saying, man, Tom, he's a nice guy. They want to get to know him. And one Sunday, they follow him back to church. How do we treat Tom's friend when they walk through the doors? This is our assimilation strategy. This is thinking through what happens then. Every church needs an intentional strategy for how they're going to treat new friends when they walk in the door. And this is a place, boy, I spent a lot of time here just seeding their thinking. Talking about things you've seen, things you've experienced, and just seeding that thinking. I often kind of illustrate, what's it like when somebody up here says, let's turn and greet one another, and the guy next to me just gives me the head bob. Your church is only as friendly as the guy standing next to me. It doesn't matter how friendly folks are up here. Being friendly down there, we lose the battle. We talk about, the front door. We talk about, maybe the parking lot. I'm a big fan of having folks on duty inside the auditorium so that your guests will know where to sit. Ever thought about that? Where do you want your guests to sit? Wherever they choose? That's a big mistake because they don't know. We talk about that. I don't want them down front because that's where all the crazy worshipers are. They're like to get hurt down there.
That's right.
I don't want them in the back because that's a whole different service, isn't it? That's something else going on.
Something else going on.
Where do I want them? I want them sitting next to the friendliest people in our church so that when that opportunity to greet, or even they don't even wait for that, they look for the opportunity to welcome new friends. Are we being intentional? All these are pieces potentially of strategy. Do we think about such things? Honestly, your main bathrooms are a big part of your connect strategy. Anybody want unchurched people at your church? I guarantee you, if somebody unchurched comes to your church, the one room I guarantee you they will go to is your bathroom. Because it is the only room in the church where they know what to do. And they will go to the bathroom when they don't have to go to the bathroom. Because they get overwhelmed a little bit with all that's unfamiliar. And they'll go to the one place where it sounds weird to say it, where they can breathe.
Breath, that's exactly right.
Take a deep breath and just relax. We're thinking about all this. Obviously, your nursery, what's happening there, you're welcoming new people, those spots that they encounter coming in. There's so much to talk about there, but the bottom line is who we're talking about. We're talking about how do we treat Tom's friend when Tom's friend walks through the door. Here you talk about, what do you do? How do you greet them? I like to tell churches that asking people to fill out a card and provide personal information before I've done a good job of welcoming them is just downright creepy. I want your data before I really said hi. I really welcomed you. My doctor is the only one that gets away with that. Anybody else, it's uncomfortable. So how do we do that? How are we intentional? What do we do when somebody visits? How do we follow up on that? All of this is a part of the answer to this second question. How are we going to treat Tom's friend when he walks through the door? Now, there are other parts of fellowship. We can have strategies as far as the congregation getting together to enjoy a relationship. We can have all that. And that's all meaningful and valuable as a part of the strategy they may build. But I need to get them focused on that new friend. Because we're talking about a new day. And we're going to have to connect with Tom's friend if we're going to see God do a new thing in our church. Loving on each other is absolutely essential. It's job one Jesus gave us. But loving on each other is insufficient as a strategy by itself to reaching out. Because the truth is, a lot of our churches, as Alan said earlier today, they're friendly to each other. Whether or not they're a friendly church, well, let your first-time guests vote on that. Let them be the ones to answer that question. And many times it's not the case, even when all my best buddies are at church. We may be a place that loves each other, but we're not great at connecting with Tom's friend. So you'll see some other things in the notes there, things that we provide. Again, I'm moving quickly through these items because, one, I think you understand them, but we're doing it all through the lens of engaging new people. How do we treat them when they walk through our doors? And then question number 3 becomes, there's so much in here. By the way, this is good stuff. Do you realize that, I think you know this, but typical data would tell us that if your church is doing a good job welcoming first-time guests, you can anticipate at least 50% of them coming back again. It is a guest return rate. It means they will come back one more time at least. If we're doing a good job. This is something churches ought to be looking at. How are we doing with this? Take those visitor cards, those guest cards you collected. Did you see them again? You see, a lot of churches pile those up or hand them to the lady that sends out the bulletin or whatever, and we're not being intentional with that information that we do gather, when we do learn about somebody. When I was pastoring, the first half of our staff meeting, the first half hour of our staff meeting every week was to walk through our list of guests. Did you meet this person? Who met this person? Talk to us about this person. We talked to him a little bit about each individual that we had a chance to connect with, so that we could, even as a team, begin to get to know them. But this is something, if you're not making any use of that information, then there's not much sense in gathering it. It's not just to add to the church mailing list. It's people that we want to connect with. And so, to kind of illustrate this, something that we did in Wichita, our church's vision was all around the concept of belonging. We wanted to love anybody we get our arms around. The way we would say it internally to ourselves is that we believe belonging is the beginning of believing and becoming. Belonging comes first, and we would say that all the time. And frankly, that church, the senior adult friends, it was the only thing they could do well. We didn't have the energy to do much else. Music was outreach was non-existent. Serving, I had a list of more things we had to stop doing than I had things we could do. Our musicians were okay, but the 12-year-olds running the overhead projectors couldn't keep up, and it really was difficult. That was before we had the money to spend on the projector. But the one thing they could do is love people. And this became our strength. And we began, and to their credit, these wonderful senior saints, they love people. Sometimes they would suffocate people. They loved them so much. We had to learn how to do it well. But they loved people. And what was crazy is God started bringing 20-somethings into our church. And walking into that room filled with people that looked like grandparents. But the love was so intense. The love was so great. They couldn't leave. They wanted to be a part of that. And we watched this whole thing unfold. But when we had grown, we probably grown to about 300, 350. And the main auditorium was full on a Sunday morning. I looked out and I said, I didn't say it. I looked out and I saw during the greeting time that my deacons were talking to deacons, that friends were talking to friends, and that the new friends in the room, even though our vision was belonging, the new friends in the room were standing there awkwardly. That somehow when the room got filled, we lost our energy. So strategically, what did we do? Pulled my leadership group together. Spouses as well. There were about 40 of us when we had all the leaders, the staff, the deacons, and their spouses. And I said, guys, we're going to do something. I want to ask you to do something with me. I said, for the next 6 months, every time you come to church, I want to ask you to do 3 things. Meet somebody you never met. Pray with or promise to pray for somebody when you're in need. And if you see a way to do it, find a way to help somebody. Meet, pray, help. MPH. Pointed out that's also miles per hour, and I told them every time you do it, we're picking up speed to become the church of our vision. Meet, pray, help. I had little cards made up. where they would come in on Sunday or Saturday night, whichever service they were part of. They'd grab a card. On that card, very simple. Meet, who did you meet? Write their name. Who did you pray with? Write their name. Who did you help? Write their name. Turn the card back in. Let's do it for 6 months and see what happens. 2 rules. You can't write the same name on the card more than once. You can't meet, pray, help the same guy. Got to get 3 different people. And the other rule was you can't write their name on the card while they're standing there. You know, hey, how you doing? Mark, is it? You just Mark, you know, when I write your name down. No, they had to remember his name long enough so down afterwards. It was so much fun to watch this unfold. When you got 40 people coming to church looking for who they can connect with rather than what they can get out of the service, it changes the whole world. And we charted this over 6 months. It was phenomenal. We sat down after 6 months and we collected all the guest cards of those who lived in our area, you know, who wasn't grandma from out of town, but who legitimately could be a part of our church. After a year, we looked at those cards again. 48% of the people on those guest cards were actively involved in our church. A retention of, after a year, of almost 50% of the people that visited our church, because we were simply intentional about keeping track of stuff. We could monitor that. The other thing was, can you imagine coming to a church where 40 people want to meet you? I remember one Sunday I'm looking across the parking lot as I'm greeting people as they're leaving, and I look across the parking lot, and one of the ladies in our church, her husband's a deacon. I usually say this wrong. I usually say one of my deacon's wives, but each only had one. It was a wife of one of my deacons, right when you say that, is sprinting in high heels across the parking lot as people are getting into their car to leave. Wait! I didn't get a chance to meet you. Just wanted to say hi, I'm Carol. And I watched that happen at the car door. Don't you know those folks? Drove away thinking, wow, that's Rimmer Church. They're running you down in the parking lot. Strategy to be intentional about how we're going to treat people when they walk through our doors. That's what you're helping them with question number 2. The truth is that if the number one thing people are looking for when they walk into your church is not God, it's friends. And we would like for it to be God. But a number of years ago, we did research on that question. God finished 9th. What are people looking for when they come to your church? God finished 9th. We wrote an 8-chapter book. We put God in chapter 8 because we weren't going to write the book without Him. Mm-hmm. But the truth is, they don't come to church looking for God. They come to church looking for you. And so when somebody visits your church, they've got to walk away believing there's a potential for friends in that house if they're ever going to come back. How are you getting that conveyed at their first 90-minute experience under your roof? What's our strategy? How do we treat them? How do we let them know we were glad they were with us? How do we follow up? How do we connect? I love to challenge churches that if the only people greeting people are the ones with the greeter name tags, then you're in trouble. Bottom line is, greeting is something that everybody does. People with greeter name tags, they're examples. They are models of hospitality. They are not hospitality people. They are the models. I learned how to greet by watching those guys. By the way, deacons, biblically, are model servants. I learned how to serve by watching those guys. It's not that they are the only servants. They are the model servants. And if deacons aren't serving, you have an unhealthy church. Let's move on. All these different places, you're just seeding their thinking. How do we welcome them? How do we follow up with them? How do we help connect them? So many things. You know all these realities that people need to connect. Question 3 then becomes, how will we teach them how to follow Jesus? This is their discipleship strategy. How do we do this? We got Tom's friend. Tom engaged a new person. He brought that friend to church. We've engaged effectively. We've connected. We've welcomed that friend and his family into our congregation. How do we now teach that friend how to follow Jesus? This is that discipleship strategy. Meeting new people, connecting with new people. How do we help them? Now, truth is, our discipleship strategy is going to encompass all of us. But do we have a place for a new believer to learn the basics of following after Jesus? Do we have ministries that are set up in such a way? What's our small group structure? All these kind of things, this discipleship strategy, you know this is enormous. This is cradle to the grave, all-encompassing of everybody that God has given us to try to disciple. We need a strategy for that. But I think it's healthiest when we look at that strategy through the lens of Tom's friend. How do we start there? How do we have a strategy that helps us grow people? Because the number one job Jesus gave us, the Great Commission, baptize them and teach them. Baptize them and teach them what he's taught us. How does that get delivered? And so when we're talking about the practical stuff here, we're talking about what that looks like in our church. We're talking about the ministries itself, when they meet, how often they meet, where they meet, all these different strategies that become a part of an intentional discipleship strategy in a church. And we want each church to have a strategy, to know what the plan is, to be intentional about how they do this. And we'll talk, again, you're going to add the wisdom, the insights you have in this. I'm a big believer that you don't have to have a one-size-fits-all strategy, because that really doesn't fit anybody. If your senior adults are connecting with Sunday school, don't cancel it just because the young adults don't want it. Be thinking about each individual. How can we engage people, helping them learn what it is to follow Jesus? And so again, you get your notes. You've got a number of question starters, things they can look at. Look at your children. How does that get taught? How are you accomplishing the Great Commission? I tell my students, when you're looking for a church to attend, don't make the decision based on whether or not you like the worship. Don't even make the decision on whether or not you think the preaching is really, really good. Decide a church to be a part of by looking at the discipleship strategy. What are we doing with the main job? And if that's something you can be a part of, that's where you want to plug in. You want to connect with that, be a part of that focus. So I know I'm moving fast. This is a little Saturday in about an hour. Okay, so you're understanding I'm moving quickly. When we're doing this in a group setting with our team, we're taking time between everyone and beginning to brainstorm ideas and thoughts in each of these questions. We're brainstorming, building lists, master lists. We're not judging ideas on day one. We're just brainstorming, thinking through what can we do? What's it look like? Remember, we said we're a church that loves people, or we said we're a church that's all about change lives, or we said we want to be a church that invests in the next generation. So how does that church answer this question? What should that look like? That's why in our church, when we talked about belonging and it came to evangelism, I told our congregation, we're talking about it, I said, you're never going to hear us advertised on the radio. No, not anti-radio at all. Don't get misunderstanding. But you're never going to see us advertise the church on TV, because here's the reality. We're a church that's all about belonging, and the way we're going to reach people is through relationship in this community. Every dime we have to spend on evangelism is going to be invested in helping you connect with your friends, not mass appeals. Now, mass appeals are fine if that's a part of your vision, if that fits where you're going, but it didn't fit us. You see that? So we're connecting the vision to how we answer these questions. What does that look like? Got to tell you, that second question, how we treat Tom's friend when he walks through our doors, man, if our church couldn't be good at that, we're sunk. We will never be the church that we dreamed of being, that place of belonging. And so we're always keeping the vision forefront. Let me just give you the last few questions here. There's so much in the notes. Question 4, though, how will we help Tom's friend find a place to serve? I love telling my students, telling in every Acts 2 Journey event, if you're not serving, you are not following Jesus. You cannot be following a servant if you're not serving. Newsflash, that serving doesn't necessarily have to happen in church. In fact, principally, it's designed to happen out there. So how do we help that person find their place to serve? I like to talk about Sunday, and serving in church is practice. Serving in church is practicing on nice people, because the real game is out there where you don't know what you're going to get. Serving in church is cultivating and understanding what it means to be a servant and growing in my sense of servanthood and being able to serve the needs of those who understand our heart and want to share in that. But the real game, don't be so busy serving in church that you have no energy left to serve in your community, because then that's an inward-focused church. And I gotta be honest, in my travels, I'll hear a lot of conversations, maybe a lot of Sundays dedicated to serving, and all I hear about is how to get plugged in and stuff's going on inside the walls. This is an out there thing. This is a marketplace assignment, this Great Commission. This isn't out there. How do we get that done? How do we help Tom's friend? How do we help him discover what his gifts are? What his ability, where he can plug in? How do we help him strategize? Al, such a good job talking. You guys talking earlier, and Ron as well, about mobilizing your people, about realizing the task here is to equip the saints. How do we do that? What is our strategy in the serve area? That's what we're after here. And if we can do that with Tom's friend, we've likely built a strategy that can work with the entire congregation, with more and more of the people in the church. But see, when we start thinking about how do we get our people to do this, we never get around to figuring out how to help Tom's friend. That's why this focus, this outward focus on those new people will keep us in a healthy trajectory as we're aiming forward. There's a lot of stuff in your notes, questions, discussion starters. All this is to help those teams. But as you teach this, you're going to bring your own dynamic to this, okay? You're not going to tell my stories. You're going to tell your stories. You're going to talk about, the priorities, the things that God has shown you when it comes to this particular function in the church. And you're after, with the friends at the tables, you're after practical strategies they're going to implement over the next few years to help them take steps toward becoming the church of that vision. The last question is, how do we teach them to pursue God? This is the worship question. How do we help Tom's friend know how to engage God in his own life? How do we help our people? There's more to worship than singing at 10:30 on Sunday morning. One of the things that frightened me is several years ago at a general council here in our Assembly of God Fellowship, we set out to interview as many pastors as we could lure into that room on the 5 functions. Talk to us about discipleship. Talk to us about worship. Talk to us about, and just get their input. Get their conversation. What frightened me when we got to this question, talk to me about worship, I think I watched over 200 video clips of pastors on this subject. I think it was like 212. 211 of them talked about music on Sunday morning. Actually, the one that didn't was a fine arts kid who was 15 years old and talked about worship being what life is all about. We've kind of gotten in this mode of the priority of Sunday so great that we've lost sight of maybe some of the bigger realities here of Kingdom Impact. Little wonder our congregation is not outward focused if we as a church aren't, if our mindset isn't. And so what does that look like? What does it mean? I want Tom's friend to learn how to pursue God on a daily basis. Incredibly frightening. What if he doesn't sing? How do you teach somebody to worship that doesn't sing? Well, we're sung, right? I mean, what is that? What are we being intentional about? Are we able to help folks pursue God on their own? The Reveal study that Dr. Ferguson mentioned earlier, one of the conclusions of that is if people aren't engaging the Word of God and engaging God on their own in a consistent way, they stop growing as Christians in about 5 years. They no longer are growing. And when they stop growing, they then become the people that are getting in the way of our church growing. So how do we do that? How do we help them? So while the notes, the process of Retreat 3 is ultimately building strategies for all 5 functions, what I've found, and what we're laying out for you today, is these 5 questions will help you build those 5 strategies. And I do think the order matters. I do think starting with finding Tom's friend will help our church stay on an outward focused trajectory and get us to move that direction. And so we begin to walk through. So when they come back, at the end of, when they come back for Retreat 4, in that gap between Retreat 3 and Retreat 4, we've asked them to build a plan. We've asked them to identify 3 to 7 steps, or whatever the notes say, 3 to 5. I teach this at school as well, and I'm not sure if my notes match these notes, but we've asked them to build strategy steps so that when they come back, they're ready to share with us not only their vision, not only their values, but now they are ready to share with us the strategic steps that they're going to take as a church over the next 3 to 5 years in order to implement their vision. Now, tomorrow we'll talk about the how power of that presentation, and we'll talk about how we encourage them specifically to build that. But we're going to be encouraging them. They're going to be getting ready for a Vision Sunday when they launch the plan. And so there's some pieces we'll talk about that we want them to do with that. But they got to build a strategy. And so those folks that wanted to get some stuff done, here we go. We're going to roll up our sleeves and agree together that we're going to take some small steps, some medium steps. Maybe there's a big dream in a couple of these areas we want to get to at some point. But what are the steps we're going to take in evangelism, in fellowship, in discipleship, in serving, and in worship that are going to help us become the church of our vision? That's what Retreat 3 is all about. And so when they walk out the door, what I hope has happened in that retreat when I'm leading it is they've already begun to brainstorm a little bit of each of these 5 areas. They've already begun to think about what could we do, what's that look like. But then when they got a busy 3 months ahead, or whatever the gap is until Retreat 4, as they put the whole plan together. Okay? Alan?
Thank you, Mike. One of the things that we do in Retreat 3 is we actually start giving them things to view that help them see what we're wanting them to build. So these questions are so important. Go back to your manual now and look at page 16. In fact, if you look prior to that, you'll see that there are some ways to help put all this down. What we're trying to do is get them to start building a plan. And so when they ask these questions that he just led you through, then they take the 5 functions and then they start building a plan. Like, here's the first thing I'm going to do. I'm going to initiate exit and sanctuary greeters. I'm going to create a new assimilation plan. Tomorrow, we'll actually take you into the training portal. This is important for you to see all of the elements. In there, there's a grow track that literally will help you with the assimilation. In fact, it's everything you need, really, for follow-up. One of the things that we talk about that you can teach, and it's kind of fun, I taught it at the national office. It's called the 5-foot rule. If somebody, we teach it to everybody, if somebody gets within 5 feet of you, they're your responsibility. Particularly if they are not recognized by you. So even in a building where 600 people are employed or whatever, so many people didn't know each other. They walk down the halls, they don't speak to each other. So I challenged them in that leadership lesson to the 5-foot rule. If you get within 5 feet of somebody, you are not allowed to walk away or walk around without speaking to them or saying something about, hey, how are you doing? Yeah, you know, they may be headed somewhere, the 5-foot rule. So you look at these, and we have some resources. You can get them other places. But discipleship. Dr. Clarence Hall mentioned a moment ago, these videos. Out of that, when he said he looked at 212, you know why? He was writing small group materials for that video series. It's called The Spirit Empowered Life Small Group Material. He wrote small group around Connect, Grow, Serve, Go, Worship with videos. It's really excellently done. You can get it from My Healthy Church. I don't think we have any out there, but that's to help you. Somebody asked me the other day in a session, I was up in the East Coast, if you could start over pastoring, what would you do that you never did when you pastored before? I said, it's a big question. I don't know if I can answer that question. But I thought of it and I said, a knee-jerk reaction is, I would try to do a one-on-one discipleship where everybody had to disciple somebody. Now, I know that's what's college called a big, hairy, audacious goal. But Thrive is one of the things that we do for that. I mean, there's so much that you could use gift-oriented ministry. So we're helping them build this plan. Then we're helping them now prioritize. And that's all that's done to help you. What will you do first? What will you do second? What will you do third? Then we talk about what you're going to do for Retreat 4. It's all in your notes. But let me show you. We're asking you to start building the plan. It's not there, Austin. So you need to find it for me. I want to give you some examples. We'll do it again tomorrow, but here's what we do, at least what I do in Retreat 3, because we're going to ask them to have a plan that is written. I want to go back and say,
make it plain.
Write it down and make it plain. We're going to ask them to build a PowerPoint. We're going to ask them to make a video. We're going to ask them to have T-shirts made. We're going to ask them perhaps to have wristbands made. We're going to ask them, when they get ready to launch, this is going to be a big deal. And so in Retreat 4, we're going to ask them to come back and give us an 8-minute. I said 8 minutes. That's a suggestion. Some will do a lot more than 8. We don't want them to. The first time I ever did this, I didn't make 8 very strong. The first church was 27 minutes. I had 17 churches. Do the math. I'm going to be there a while. Say 8. So we asked them to do something. Ron's really big on this one. When we get to the launch Sunday, they're going to use their video. They're going to use their PowerPoint. The video can create some emotion. The PowerPoint can create information. But you can commit to something that's written. Here's a pastor who is now one of our trainers. He pastors a great church in California. When he first went to his church, this church is in California. This is his story. His story. It's landlocked in Southern Cal. He has said we had 90 old white people. He said, I was discouraged and I was ready to quit. I went through in Acts 2 where Dr. McManus was the facilitator. And we built a plan. And we began to live our plan. When they got here, about 4 years later, they decided to go through the journey again. And so they built a brand new booklet and a brand new plan. His name is Lauren Hicks, and here's his. There's their vision statement, and I have an actual copy of the booklet. There's their team. This is page 1 in their booklet. He writes a little message. There's their mission, universal mission, great commandment. They actually put a 1-sentence description of every one of the 5 functions. There's their values, spiritual fluency, Holy Spirit empowerment, celebrating diversity, transforming prayer, global missions. Then they wrote some objectives. Then they went and did some demographic study about the rationale of who lives around us, what's the ethnic breakdown, how many people are divorced, how many people are under that age. Then they were very brave. They wrote their minimal health factors right there. 40% of the people in their church do not believe that they do a good job of discipling belief. They wrote all of the 35% does not believe that does not give monthly to world missions. 30% believe it's difficult for a person to find a new friend. That's bold. That's gutsy. That's what they did. Then they give their realities. Whoops. So this is now they've started out with 90. Now they have 275 adherents, 180 average attendance. They end up with wanting to plant another church, 35 nationalities finally. So then there's their strategic plan. That's what they're going to do in the next 3 to 5 years on Connect. There's Grow. These are all their plans. So that's what we're asking them to commit to. Here's the PowerPoint that. Where's the video? Austin, can we play it?
Yep.
Here's one that brought to their deal. They brought a video, and this was their presentation. This is a church from California out of that same group.
We've been working together on our Acts 2 process. Through this, we understand that our purpose and mission of the church, it's the what of the church. We know that it's to love God, to love others, and to reach the lost. The what of the church we've seen demonstrated very clearly through the teachings in Acts chapter 2 of connect, grow, serve, go, and worship. We understand the why. Why do we do this? Because Jesus says it. He said to love God with all our hearts, to love each other as we love ourselves, and to go into all the world and make the disciples. Grace Community is one church in many locations, so we're a little different. Our goal and our desire is to be a healthy church, demonstrating the love and the power of Christ in each community we serve. As a team, we were able to define our core values, the things that are really important to us, those things that have helped to shape us in this process. Our core values are genuine, authentic fellowship, organic growth, practical biblical understanding, empowering ministry, and intentional excellence. Would you watch as our team brings shape to these values?
At Grace Community, we embrace an opportunity for an authentic community to encourage and strengthen one another in our Christ story. So for the next few years, we're going to focus how to connect to the community. For example, we're going to build the brand new cafe at our campus so that people can come and hang out and get connected. And we also embrace to encourage our credential holders to be more involved in the ministry as well.
Organic growth. Part of that is by implementing baptismal courses every quarter, as well as membership classes, and bringing those into our fellowship through a discipleship program that will be promoted from the pulpit. Another aspect is the spiritual health. We want to do a checkup on each member of our congregation to see what their gifts are. We plan on accomplishing this by putting our members through a spiritual health track: cardio, the heart, strength training, discipleship, and endurance, the ministry.
We embrace the empowering ministry of the Holy Spirit by equipping Grace Community to impact those in our reach. First, education. Identifying gifts is so important, and it's where we need to start. Also, serving opportunities for new members. The moment someone makes a decision for Christ is the moment they become a part of the body. That's where we come in to get them plugged in ASAP. Next, leaders training leaders. It's so important to give an opportunity to let iron sharpen iron. Last, adopt a school. We want to connect with one school at each of our campuses to pour into any way we can, even if it's painting a classroom over summer vacation. And that is how we plan to serve by using our gift-oriented ministries.
We believe in evangelism. We embrace demonstrating Christ to those within our reach with an invitation to experience Him. So one of the ways that we, Grace Community, are keeping evangelism close to our heart is by continuing to keep church parenting as part of our DNA. This is a way that we can continue to extend our reach beyond the city of Whittier. We've already entered cities like Bell Gardens, Westminster, and Hacienda Heights, and going further than that. We here at Grace Community are also embracing local and global missions, sending people from here, our Grace Community campus, to all parts of the nation, even the schools that are neighboring our churches.
We embrace the progression towards excellence, resulting from efforts of wholehearted sincerity for the glory of Christ. We plan to incorporate intentional excellence by way of worship. We want to create an environment and an atmosphere where people feel free to express themselves in worship. We also want to have conversations about personal worship, how that plays out throughout the week. We as a team want to be examples in worship. We want to be leading the way, and we want to be intentional about the way we do that, by sharing how we are worshiping during the week and actually telling people about the experiences that we're having. And that is how we're going to incorporate intentional excellence.
Our strategic plan It's the same for each campus. However, each campus has a little different flavor to it in its community context. And so each of these locations will flesh out what it looks like, what's necessary for them to reach their community. Grace Community is moving forward. We're believing God for great things as we continue to develop and strategize to reach our communities where we're located. Thank you.
So they have a little bit better capacity. They have printed material for all of that. Here's a small church that has limited budget. They don't even have this stapled. But if you come look at it, it's an excellent presentation of their strategic plan. Last week I was in Kansas. That's a multi-site church. There was a multi-site church. They had a video. They had a professional team, I think, do the video. There was another church there in a town of 1,800 with a church of 40. They did a video with a phone, and you ought to see it. In fact, we'll put it on our website in the training portal. It may be better than the one that had it with a professional. So my point is, because of size or limited budget, I don't want anybody to feel like they cannot participate in this exercise.
That's right.
They can do this. They can do this. And some of them come. There's a little church in Arkansas. They brought their booklet. It was amazing. They were so happy. They had 61 average attendance. And by the time they went through the process, half of their church was involved in serving. And they were so excited about their presentation. There are stories galore of people who have lived from Saturday to Saturday, not ever dreaming about the future, not ever casting vision, not ever sitting and talking to each other. This is an element that I don't know, maybe so, but I don't know of any other church health activity that leads them this far to build and produce a written plan. A lot of people tell them what to do, what they should do, but they don't teach them how. So we have all kinds of videos. Tim Black, we got one of yours. Your video, or PowerPoint, I can't remember which. Hey, Tim. I mean, it's amazing. Greg, we'll talk a little bit more about this tomorrow, but we're right here, right now. On that last group 4, I remember the first time, well, Greg went through it first, and then he came through it again with the emotion of that retreat 4. Unbelievable, isn't it?
Yeah, amazing.
I mean, I've seen grown superintendents, leaders just break down and cry to see their people, how they're so excited about reaching their communities and reaching around the world.
The church that you're talking about, you and I both, you were at one end of the room and I was at the other. We were both in tears. Flag Spring Church just up the road in St. James, Missouri. The high school volunteered to produce their video for them. And so they made it a school project. And so they did a full-blown video presentation that the high school put together for them because they've been so involved and so connected. And it just left us all in tears.
Isn't that amazing? I guess if I knew that, I'd forgotten it. The high school did it. And it's just, it really is one of the most moving times that you can go through because they're so excited. And many of them have never done anything like that. Would that be your experience, Tom? I mean, they never have. 64 churches in his district has gone through. So this is, and we'll make it. Here's a church in Penang, Malaysia, pastored by a Chinese pastor. He didn't even go through a cohort. He went through one of these, and yet he built his own book. It's English on the front, Chinese on the back. It's fascinating how that some people can just take a concept and build the whole thing out. Stand up, please. We're not going to let you go, but I do want you to stretch a minute. We've been at this. We've been giving you some information.